What is going on, everyone? Jim here, RCAD, working on the Trx4 Sport Traxx today. Goal, improved approach angle and departure angle, as well as a little bit more clearance between our tracks and our rock sliders. Some simple upgrades that you can do to your Trx4 Sport Traxx, or any Trx4 for that matter. Right off the bat, everybody, I gave it a body lift. Pretty easy to do. Just raised up the body post on the front one notch on the rear as well. Next was raising up the rock sliders to match our body lift. So I used a couple of these little spacers right here, removed the rock sliders, and installed 8 of these spacers, 4 on each side. So 2 right here and 2 right here, as well as some longer screws to raise up the rock sliders, roughly 2 millimeters. And those spacers came out of this kit right here, RC 4-wheel drive, scaler and crawler screws and support bag, part number Z-S0445. Very convenient to have this. It came with a whole bunch of different kinds of spacers in here. I've used a bunch of them since I've gotten the kit, but also has grub screws and M3s and nylon lock nuts and all kinds of other goodies in here as well. So very convenient to have something like that laying around. And I also raised up the front bumper to match your body. Pretty easy little process to do with that. Very simple, as a matter of fact. Remove our bumper. I came in here and I removed these 2 screws on one side of the frame, the 2 corresponding screws on the other side. Removed our bumper bracket from the frame, flipped it around, and reinstalled it. It was installed on the low side of the frame, and now we have it on the upper portion of the frame. So just giving it a slight lift there with the bumper mount itself. Now, since we only raised the body up 1 notch, I didn't want to raise it up too high. You start raising it up too high, and it starts exposing the inner fenders. So right now, the fender flares are blocking the inner fenders. So I'm happy with that right there. But the bumper was a little bit too high in that position. So what I did is I came over here and removed this bracket off of the bumper itself and flipped it upside down as well, just to drop it down a pinch. So in its stock position, this is on the downside and this is upside down. So technically it's on the upside. So if you want to get even more height out of your bumper, you could just leave that in a stock position, come in here and trim a little bit of body plastic off of that, and you would have adequate clearance. But I didn't want to trim any plastic off of it, so I just simply reversed this bracket around a little bit. So we did get the bumper up higher than what it was in stock position, and we just dropped it down a little bit just so we can clear our body after lifting it. So obviously it is up higher because we had to drop it a pinch just to clear our body. And that's what we're looking at right now. And then looking right in here between the body and the front bumper bracket, if you were to flip that around the other way, it brings it right up into the bottom of the body, so you'd have to come in here and trim out quite a bit of plastic in order to get that to clear. So just to repeat that, we pulled the bumper mount out, flipped it upside down, reinstalled it, disconnected our secondary bumper mount from the bumper itself, flipped it upside down, reinstalled it onto the bumper, and then reinstalled the bumper to get our appropriate height there. We can go higher. You can flip this bracket around and bring the bumper up even higher. But once again, you have to come in here and trim a little bit of plastic out of there just so you can clear all that nonsense. And looking at the front bumper while we have it off of the vehicle, we will be getting a winch for this vehicle at some point in time, along with an aluminum front bumper with a winch mount on it. But for the time being, just to dress this up a little bit, I use an RC 4-wheel drive stock tow hook and winch rope, and wound it around the stock plastic winch here just to make it look a little bit more realistic. So I basically took this part off of the bumper, drilled a bunch of big holes there in the bottom half of the winch, just so I could feed the string around the fake spool. I brought the hook in through the center. There's a hole right down here in the center. So I have the hook tied on its own separate little short piece of string, and that's going into the center, and it's tied off on the back half of the spool. Then the rest of the winch line is separate. And I brought that in over on one side over here, tied it off, and then just wrapped it around the winch and back around again. And then tied that all off right there. So our tow hook is this knot on the right, and our rope is the knot on the left. Just trying to make that look a little bit more like a real winch. Moving on to the rear bumper. We raised this one as well. Pretty easy to do, other than coming in and trimming out plastic on the body after the fact. So here's a look at your factory rear bumper mount. Same one on the Trx4 Broncos as well. one heck of a drop on that coming off the back of the frame, so it drops down quite a bit. So what we did is we ordered another factory front bumper mount, and then I installed it right back here on the back of the truck. And I put that in the down position so it's sitting slightly below the frame rail versus in the up position and sitting slightly above the frame rail. And that significantly raised up our rear bumper. And then I had to come back in here and trim a little bit of plastic off in between our rear fender and tailgate, just to smooth all that stuff out and get our body back up above the bumper. So that is what we're looking at with that. Pretty easy upgrade. All right, next thing that I did to the vehicle, more of a dress-up thing, just a little custom touch to the vehicle. So I came in here and I touched up all of the M3 cap head screws going into the track units and painted those with a Sharpie, of all things. That is a metallic blue sapphire Sharpie, which kind of makes them look like anodized aluminum, the bolts. That is 2 coats that I put on there. It actually looks like that with 1 coat, but I put a second coat on there just to blend it in a little bit better. It actually matches the body pretty good as far as color goes with those. Kind of a blue anodized aluminum look. Very easy to do with these as well. Just back the screws out so the head was exposed on each one of these along there. And then I had these guys right here. I just pulled these out 3 at a time. I just went 1, 2, 3 and pulled those out so the head of the screw was exposed. Hit them with the Sharpie, let them dry, reinstalled those 3, and then pulled out these other 3 and painted those up. Did the same thing on the back of the Traxx as well with our exposed bolts. And right there on the inside of the track, where the bolts stick through, or where the screws stick through to the other side, I just pulled the screws out and painted the end of the head of the screw, and then reinstalled them. Just to kind of complete the whole package there. And here's a look at those markers. They have a silver metallic Sharpie, works really well, writes on anything. And that stuff is like more permanent than your standard Sharpie. They have a metallic ruby Sharpie, bronze metallic, metallic emerald. Here's the one that we used on the Traxx, metallic sapphire. And then we have gold metallic as well. And here's a couple of quick examples of what the gold and silver look like on black plastic. So black plastic, and that is our silver Sharpie right there, silver metallic. And here's our gold metallic. 1 coat over black plastic will make it look like that, but these have 2 coats on them. So there's our silver and our gold. The bronze, in my opinion, is very nice as well. And there is just a quick peek at the bronze. I just kind of slapped some on the back of this body mount just to give you an idea of what the bronze looks like in comparison to the gold and silver. And with the body removed from the truck, we can take a peek at our rear bumper mount once again, mounted in the lower position there, slightly below the frame. More of a one-to-one shot with the frame, so it definitely raised up the rear bumper back there. Better shot at our front bumper mount, which is mounted slightly above the frame. And you can see how our stock bracket is bent down here. Once again, reverse position, stock position for this next bracket is flipped around the other way. While we're under here, we can take a peek at our rock sliders. Once again, raise these up. Remove the rock sliders. You can see that spacer down inside there. Right down in there. And that's the most difficult part about raising these up, is trying to get all of these screws and all of these spacers back onto this platform without dropping your spacers off of the end of the screws. Very difficult process there, because you're mounting it onto plastic pins under here, essentially, or plastic mounts or tabs under here. So either you're going to have to balance those little spacers on top of that plastic mount, or possibly put a dab of glue on them to hold them in place where they need to go. or do the balancing act like I did for getting these installed. So nevertheless, there it is. The rock sliders have been raised up 2 millimeters. Body mounts, piece of cake, easy to do, pretty much self-explanatory. Remove this screw here, that screw there, raise this up 1 notch, and reinstall your screws. Piece of cake. Same thing with the rear mount back here. Remove this screw here, this other corresponding screw right here. Pull your pins out and raise this up 1 notch, reinstall your pins. I came in and installed a set of rock lights for my niece, so we've got a set of rock lights in the vehicle as well. And the last simple upgrade that I made to the vehicle was installing a simple on-off switch right here for our lights. Looking at the wiring for the vehicle, we do have a BEC kit hooked up to this as well, so we have power coming off of the ESC going to the BEC. So the BEC kit came with this 3-way JST splitter. So the power comes off the ESC, goes into the splitter, branches off and runs around the battery tray and goes over to the BEC kit over there. And then from there, this other end of our JST plug would be going around to the power supply for your lights. Instead, I've got it going into our light switch. So here's our power coming into our light switch. And then it's leaving our light switch and coming around to right here and going back into our power supply. So all our little on-off switch is doing is just interrupting power between the ESC and the power supply for the lights itself. Has nothing to do with the BEC. It's not going to affect that whatsoever, because our BEC is getting its power right here. We're just branching off and getting a little bit of extra power for the lights off of that splitter. So just a little simple on-off switch interrupting the power going from the ESC to the power supply. And that controls the lights for her complete vehicle. We have the rock lights plugged into the power supply right down here. And when we install the body, obviously we plug the body into the power supply. And when you flip on the switch, it turns on the rock lights and the main body lights for the truck itself. And lastly, before we leave here, this is just a spur of the moment, has nothing to do with the Trx4 Sport, but more just to do with Trx4s in general. A viewer had asked me about my brother's Trx6 6x6 and about a squeaky noise that was coming from the 6x6. You know, to be honest with you guys, I had the same squeaking problem on my Trx4 Bronco as well, and that was the only 2 Trx4s we had the problem with. But the problem is coming from right here with the truck. So if you're getting a squeaky sound coming from your brand new Trx4, look right up here on this drive shaft collar and see if it's starting to get scarred up on the collar. It's basically just a slip-on collar, and it helps keep the drive shaft pins in place. It's like a keeper, so to speak. So on my Bronco and on my brother's 6x6, this collar was rubbing on the transfer case cross member up in there where that plastic wraps around the drive shaft. So it was actually rubbing right in there. So what I did is I removed the drive shaft, and then I just basically sanded this collar down and thinned it out as thin as I could possibly get it without losing any strength on it. And then I came in with a file and kind of filed down the inside of our transfer case cross member right up on the back edge there and around the back edge of the drive shaft. So if you're getting a squeaky noise coming from your Trx4, look right here first at this and see if that's got some scars on it. If that's scarred up, you need to do some sanding in here to eliminate that. And I have done that with my Bronco and with my brother's Trx6, and the problem has gone away, so no more noise. And that is going to do it, everyone. Just a couple of quick, simple upgrades that you can make to your Trx4 Sport Traxx, or any Trx4 for that matter, with raising up the body and flipping the bumper brackets around, replacing that huge drop-down rear bumper mount bracket for another front bumper mount, and raising up your bumpers, raising up your body, raising up your rock sliders, gaining more approach angle, more departure angle on the back, as well as more clearance for your tires and tracks as far as coming into contact with the rock sliders in the body. So that is going to do it. Very much appreciated for y'all sticking around and watching the video. As always, questions and comments are always welcome, and we will see you all on the next one.